Right, now we need to use Firebase for our backend authentication and storage. Firebase contains tools and services that developers can use to build and manage mobile and web applications. Now to do this, open Chrome and go to firebase.com. Then click sign in. Once you've created your Firebase account, you can click go to console. And then add a project. So click this create a Firebase project. The name of our project will be portfolio, like this. Then click continue. You don't need this, so remove this. You can remove analytics. Now wait for Firebase to create your project. Then click continue. And Firebase will open your project now. Now it says get started by adding Firebase to your app. So what we're doing is we're creating a web app. So click on these tags right here for web app. Now the name of our web app will be portfolio. You don't need to click this, so just continue. Now it says add Firebase SDK. Firebase SDK just means Firebase Software Development Kit. So we need to run this command to install Firebase. So just copy this. Then go back to your app, go back to your VS Code and paste it right here. Press Ctrl V on your keyboard to paste it. Then click enter. Right, now in your source folder, right click, create a new file. Firebase-config.js. Now go back to Firebase and you should see this block of code. Click the copy button. Now go back to your app and click paste again, Ctrl V. Now you can remove all these comments. Just like this. Now we still need to add some things to this. So first go back to your Firebase once again. Click continue to console. Click authentication. If authentication is not here, go to build. Then click on authentication from here. Then click get started. Now there's multiple different methods that we can use, but for simplicity we'll use email and password. Now click enable. You should see it go green and a tick appear. Then click save. Now go to your users and from here just add a user, add your own email. So I'll add my email. Then I'll add my password. And I'll add this user. Right, now go to build again and look for Firebase Firestore database. Now click on Create Database. And just click on the region. We'll just use US Central 1. Now you can click Start in production mode. Now you should have an empty collection, so leave this for now. Go to rules, and for the sake of testing, it says allow read and write if false. Change that to is true and click publish. Now you can see your security rules are defined as public, so anyone can still modify or delete data in your database. Now we'll just use this for testing. So go back to your application now, and in your Firebase -config.js file, now inside your Firebase config file, add get auth from Firebase auth. Then add import get Firestore from Firebase Firestore. Now come to the bottom of your app, and then export const auth from get auth. Now export DB, which stands for database, from get Firestore app. What's happening here is we've created a Firestore app using initialize app, and we pass in our configuration. Now once Firebase creates this app, we can use this app to initialize our authentication using get auth and pass our app through, and we can initialize our Firebase database by using get Firestore and passing our app through. Now we'll start with our login, so go back to your login component. Auth login. If you are trying to improve your coding skills and learn how to build apps on your own, check out dayoneprogrammer.com for learning web development and mobile development. Get all the YouTube episodes in advance, plus some exclusive projects. You'll also get all the learning resources for building the mobile versions of all the apps. The first 5,000 people to use the link below this video to subscribe to dayoneprogrammer.com will get 50% off their subscription for life. And under auth, under this folder, create a new file. Call this file authroute.jsx. So this will be an auth component. We'll just write out the full component, and then I'll explain everything later. So just start off by importing useEffect and useState from React. Then import get auth and on auth state changed from Firebase auth. Lastly, import useNavigate from React router. Now you'll see that we're using a different method to define our function in this component. Now this method we use const, and then we use an arrow function, so it's still a function, but it'll just look different. And then export our function. Now go back to your function in between the curly brackets. Now initialize our variables. Now we create a use effect hook. I'll explain hooks later on. Okay, now just make sure that we have all our variables defined, and then in this use effect hook, make sure that we define our unsubscribe variable, or our unsubscribe function in this case, and we'll have our if statement here, and then else, and then after all of that we'll have a return statement, and then our two dependencies, which will be auth and navigate. Once again, I'll go in depth on this later on. Finish off with this if statement with two return values right here. Now go to your main.jsx file, and in this file import our auth route. Just make sure you import auth route from the / components auth route. I'll explain how this path works once again. So the dots and then the / means in the directory of this current file. Go to the main.jsx file in the project directory. Now you see your main.jsx file is under your source directory. So right now we're in the source directory. So the dot and / puts us in the current directory of the file we're working in, which is the main.jsx file, which means we're in the source directory. So in the source directory, you'll see we have a components folder. So we go into the components folder with the /. So now we're in this folder. And once we're in this folder, you'll see we've got an auth folder, a blogs folder, and some other files. So you know we need to go into the auth folder. So we go auth and another /, and then the file you're looking for, which is auth route. And that's how we get this path to auth route. Now go to this route right here with the path of create blog and an element of create blog. Now we simply wrap our create blog element in our auth route element. So I'll have an auth route opening tag and then a closing tag around our create blog element. Now back on our website. If we try go to the create blog path, we should go to the login page. And you'll see we have been redirected to the login page. So this indicates that our auth route is working perfectly fine. If you did have problems trying to load that, one of the solutions might be to go to your Firebase config file and then just comment out these lines and remove these lines. Let the app run, and then once the app is running, add these lines back in. Okay, now that that is done, we can move on to handling our login logic, our create blogs, and fetching blogs. So start with the login. Start off with importing. Import useState from React. Then import useNavigate of the link. Then import this function. Import sign in with email and password from Firebase/Auth. And then lastly, we're going to import our auth variable from our Firebase config file. Now inside our function, const navigate equals useNavigate. And then const email and set email are equal to useState, and then to initialize this hook, we'll put our empty string. Then do the same for our password variable. Again, do the same for our error variable. And then to initialize our authenticating variable, we'll set it to false. Now let's create a function. So here we have an asynchronous function. I'll explain this later on. It's called handle login, and what we do is first we set this authenticating variable to true. If you are trying to improve your coding skills and learn how to build apps on your own, Check out dayoneprogrammer.com for learning web development and mobile development. Get all the YouTube episodes in advance, plus some exclusive projects. You'll also get all the learning resources for building the mobile versions of all the apps. The first 5,000 people to use the link below this video to subscribe to dayoneprogrammer.com will get 50% off their subscription for life. And then we set our error variable to an empty string, just in case there was an error thrown on the previous attempt. This will reset that state. Now we call this function. This is a function straight from Firebase to help us log in. We've imported it up here. So import sign in with email and password from Firebase/auth. That's the same function we're using. We need to pass in an auth state, and this auth variable comes from here. At the top we've imported an auth variable from our config file, firebase-config. We've got our email variable, which we've initialized here as an empty string, and we'll change it later on. Same with our password variable, which is here. We've initialized it with an empty string. And then once we've called this function, if it's successful, we'll navigate to the create blog path. Otherwise, if there's an error, we use the .catch. It will send an error object. I'll explain objects in a later section. And then we take the message property of our error object and we'll display that to the user. Now let's finish editing our input fields. So add a required property because we need the user to enter this. Value will be equal to email because this is the email input. We'll collect the email from the user and store it inside a variable called email. And then onChange means that when the input is being filled in, the set email will be called, and whatever is in that input value will be now set to email. Okay, this onChange event handler will take any input event from the user into our input field. So it'll take the input event and then it'll set the new email variable to whatever was inputted by the user. So as the user enters the email, it will take the user's email and assign it to the value of email. Now we just need to do the same for password. Add the required property because it is needed. Set the value to password because we want to store the input in the password variable. Set this onChange event handler. Now let's test this out. In the login page, enter your details. Remember, we created an authentication account in Firebase, so we're going to use these details that you use to create your account. Then click login. Okay, it looks like we have an error, so we need to go back to our file. Right, in our button component, we need to add an event handler. So on click, had no login. So that's the problem, we didn't add the function to the button. So now when we click the button, we should log in. Okay, then add disabled authenticating. Now come back to your create blog component. We need to fix this. It still says login, so just make sure it says create blog. Then let's go back to the home page. Click the login button. And you should see we get taken to our create blog page. So now we need to add the functionality to this page. So in your create blogs component, we need to import some things. Import use state from React. Then import add doc and collection from Firebase/Firestore. Now import db from Firebase-config. Lastly, import use navigate from React router. Now I'll say const navigate equals use navigate. Now we just need to initialize our title variables like this. So we've set our const title, our summary, and our content, and initialize them to empty strings. Make sure you've got empty strings in these brackets, otherwise they will not work. Now let's create our function. Once again, we use async function and then create our function, which will be create post. Now I will explain this async function later. Now we need a reference to our database. So the way we'll do that is we'll create a variable called post collection reference, and then we'll use this collection function, which is imported from Firestore, and we'll pass in our db variable and our blogs. Right, here's the function we're going to use. I will explain this function further on. Now go to input elements once again. Add a required property. Set the value of the first input to title. Add the onChange event handler. Then move to the next section. So we've just completed these two input fields as well. So we just needed to set the value to summary and add the onChange event handler. And then the value here is content and then the onChange event handler. Now we need our button. The button needs to create the post when it's clicked. Now let's go to our page. And then now create blog component. Just create demo blog 1. This is a summary of our first blog. Now we have our title, which is demo blog 1. We have our summary, this is a summary of our first blog. Then we have our content. This is the content of our blog. Now when we click this post blog button, it should create the post. And you'll see that we get a success alert, which means the post has been created. So if you go to Firebase again and go to your Firestore database, inside our blogs collection which we've created, you'll find our first post. And you'll see content, this is the content of our blog. The summary, this is a summary of our first blog. And the title, which is demo blog 1. So that's successful. Now we need a way to fetch these blogs. So let's go to this blogs page or blogs component. Import useState and useEffect from React. Then import useNavigate from React Router. Then import getDocs and collection. Now you remember when we uploaded the blog, we used addDoc. Now we need to get it. If you are trying to improve your coding skills and learn how to build apps on your own, check out day1programmer.com for learning web development and mobile development. Get all the YouTube episodes in advance, plus some exclusive projects. You'll also get all the learning resources for building the mobile versions of all the apps. The first 5,000 people to use the link below this video to subscribe today on programmer.com will get 50% off their subscription for life. And lastly, import db from our firebase-config file. Now initialize our navigate variable. And then initialize our blog list variable to an empty array. Now the way we initialize to an empty array is we use empty square braces. Now remember, when we initialize it to a string, we use the inverted commas. For a number, you can use 0, and for boolean, true or false. Now for the array, we're using empty brackets, square brackets. Then initialize our blog collection reference. This is the reference that we send to Firebase so it locates our documents for us. Now we use this collection function again, which is here, pass in our database and our collection name. Remember, with these variable names we use camel case. So the first letter of the word will be lowercase, So now we've initialized our use effect hook. We just need to add the dependency array, just leave it empty. Okay, we've initialized this. I will explain this later on, but essentially we're creating a function that's going to get the blogs. Then we store the blogs in a data variable, and then we get all the blogs and add them to the list. Our list here, blog list. Now in this empty div that we have here, we'll create Alright, we finished with this element. Now what happens here is that we dynamically render the content, which means Firebase renders it and sends it to the client. And then once we got that, we store it inside a div, which is an h1 element, two h1 elements. We've added some styling so that they're visible. Now if you go back to your page, you go to the home page, click on blogs, and you should see the blog pop up right here. Now we will add some styling and improve this page, but in terms of functionality, our website is done. If you are trying to improve your coding skills and learn how to build apps on your own, check out dayoneprogrammer.com for learning web development and mobile development. Get all the YouTube episodes in advance, plus some exclusive projects. You will also get all the learning resources for building the mobile versions of all the apps. The first 5,000 people to use the link below this video to subscribe to dayoneprogrammer.com will get 50% off their subscription for life.